It wasn't a regular feud between management and workers. What happened at Maruti Suzuki's Manesar plant this week was all-out mayhem. A 50-year-old general manager, Awinash Kumar was brutally beaten by workers, his legs smashed and then left to die in a fire as a mob of workers went after the plant's management. His body was burned so badly that it took more than a day to identify him, and that too through a tooth. More than 90 workers have been arrested since then, but a special investigation team is now on the hunt for the 12 main accused.
रोज भी इस तरह की घटना ना घटे ताकि किसी का परिवार ना उजड़े।
Avnish Kumar Dev's younger brother Amitabh cannot believe his brother is dead. The entire Dev family devastated. Avnish was burnt to death by labour workers on Wednesday at Maruti's Manesar factory.
News now from Manesar, the company's general manager.
And to add to the horror, the family came to know about Avinash's death through the news on TV.
न्यूज़ देखकर हमने फोन किया उनको, तो बोलते हैं नहीं, पता ही नहीं चला मिसिंग है अभी भी।
Avnish's death came as a fight between a line worker and his supervisor at Maruti's Manesar plant grew out of control, with workers setting buildings on fire and attacking management with car parts.
सिंपल सी बात है कि ये घटना नहीं लग रही है, ये एक बहुत बड़ी कंपनी की साजिश है और एम्प्लॉय की साजिश है, जिससे एक निर्दोष व्यक्ति की असाधारण रूप से मौत हुई है।
लेबर्स थे, काफी मतलब झड़प हो गया था और उन्होंने आग लगा दिया था और तो भैया उसमें ही इंज्योर हो गए थे और उनका पूरा बॉडी जल गया। जलने के बाद डीएनए टेस्ट हुआ तो उससे पता चला और फिर मेरे जो नंदोसी हैं अनिल जी, वो दिल्ली में जाके उन्होंने कंफर्म किया कि ये भैया हैं।
And as we look at that mayhem in Manesar, should there be a crackdown on militant trade unionism? This is actually a story that has many shades of grey as well. It's not about one side against the other. And, joining us on the program tonight, we have K. Kumar, who was a friend of Mr. Dev, who died in that violence there in Manesar. He's written a very emotional email to the media today about what has happened. Mr. Manishankar Iyer and Paranjoy Guha Thakurdar continue to stay with us. We'll be joined shortly by Gurudas Das Gupta of the CPI, and Suhel Seth joins us tonight as well. Mr. Kumar, you know, you wrote in your email today that this is not just an ordinary industrial dispute. Explain to us, you know, your anger on this, to see your friend die like this. I know this must be a very difficult time for you, and obviously you are very angry.
I am. Avnish and I and 35 others, we shared a dormitory for many years. I can't imagine what system of justice and what system of anger will make people break a person's leg and leave him there to suffocate and burn. And I do not know what dispute resolution is this. And this is murder. Let us be very clear about it. This is murder like any mob violence, whether it is happening in a communal violence or whether it is anything. And no cause can justify this murder. And I know the criminal justice system in this country will not help us. I am here in defiance to protest against this murder of a dear friend of ours.
I'm really sorry for your loss, Mr. Kumar, and I can see the very visible anger there. Let me just get to the rest of the panel first tonight. Suhel Seth, is militant trade unionism back in this country? We hadn't seen it for a very long time. Is it back?
I would go one step forward and say there is some undefinable rage that is engulfing most of India, and people, especially within the trade union movement, believe that they are being deprived of their rights. Whether that's true or false, we don't know the contours of this particular incident. But the reality is it does more damage than good. For instance, it makes states like Haryana, which is a well-developed, prosperous state, then sink into the morasses from which it won't recover. I was born and raised in Calcutta. I saw what trade unionism and militant trade unionism did to manufacturing in Calcutta, or for that matter in large parts of West Bengal, and it brought about a long spell of ruin which continues sadly to this day. It's not about conflict resolution, it's about the mechanism in which we believe that we can resolve conflict. The fact that we can take the law into our own hands, the fact that justice for those who commit these crimes is not as swift as it should be, the fact that we don't implement labor laws with alacrity that we should, the fact that firing in India is still very, very difficult. So, you know, you have a system which is self-destructive at the core. So it's not about just the politics, it's also about the policy. It's also about the willingness to come to terms with this, because a lot of the trade union movements then fuel the political parties that exist. So they are as parasitical as everyone else. So you need a solution which is bottom-up rather than top-down. You won't be able to stop this with police intervention. You will not expect the politicians to react with the kind of immediacy that they should. This is something that requires urgent attention. Haryana will suffer. More importantly, Brand India will be shamed for no reason.
Brand India will be shamed. This is a self-destructive system. That is how Suhel Seth sees it, Mr. Manishankar Iyer. Obviously, I know you would be horrified by what has happened to this general manager of Maruti. I don't think anyone can justify violence, even if you're not being paid your wages or you have grievances with your pay. But how do you respond to what Suhel has said?
I'd first like to respond to Mr. Ram Kumar and request him to please convey to the family my deepest and most sincere condolences. I also want to say that I agree with Suhel that there are many issues involved in this which go beyond the particular incident. I certainly hope Mr. Ram Kumar will find justice in what does amount to murder and should not be condoned, and I condone no violence at all. But one asks oneself, why should a company which was so famed for its industrial relations, in that everybody had a uniform and they all sat at 8 together and so forth, a Japanese work ethic was being introduced into our country, and we all stood agog trying to see how this new industrial relationship is going to be developed, become the scene of the kind of violence we've seen not only yesterday, but also in several incidents over the recent past. And I think the real issue, I'm not concerned with Brand India, because that would concern people who are profiting from Brand India, which is a tiny segment of our population. What worries me is this is the expression of an immense frustration among our urban lower middle classes and the proletariat at the extraordinary inequality that is being fostered, especially in urban India. I understand from my economist friend Vivek Devroy that preliminary calculations show that the Gini coefficient, which measures inequality, has doubled in the last 10 years between the previous census in 2001 and the latest census of 2011. Now, if we are going to have an economic model in which growth leads to this kind of inequality, it's bound to foster frustrations. And fostering frustrations in a democracy where everyone has the right to demonstrate and so forth will inevitably lead to this kind of violence in urban India, as we are already seeing in tribal India in the Naxalite areas.
Right.
And therefore I would regard this as a wake-up call that unless we put the wheel of social justice along with the wheel of economic progress, this is the kind of thing that we're going to see proliferating in both urban and in rural India. It will be a disaster for our democracy as well as our development.
I just want to get to Foreign Joy first before I get to Guru Das Gupta. You know, there are all kinds of reports that have been coming in ever since this incident happened. One is about the work culture in this particular plant, where workers have said, you know, that in a shift of 8 hours, they got 2 breaks of 7 minutes each, in which they had to like eat, go to the bathroom, whatever. Latecomers were half a day's salary would be knocked off. At the same time, other reports say that they got a pretty decent salary of about 18,000 rupees every month. That included an incentive of about 8,000 rupees. So explain to us, what do you think has gone wrong here?
You know, a lot has gone wrong. Are we moving back to the situation that prevailed in the 60s in West Bengal? Suhel was talking about that. Or in the 70s in Maharashtra? You know, I mean, Manishankar Iyer was right when he talked about the growing inequality. Look at what food inflation has done to the real incomes of people who get fixed salaries. as Manishankar rightly pointed out, here was Maruti. Interestingly, the Japanese company, Suzuki, now has a greater share, is controlling the management of the company. They took such a lot of pride in becoming quote-unquote egalitarian. I remember people like Mr. R.C. Bhargav saying, I wear the same uniform as the guy on the shop floor. I eat at the same canteen as them. Why then has things moved? Do you blame the militant trade unionism? Do you blame an insensitive management? Do you blame a non-functional labor department?
All of them.
All of it. So if these kind of incidents have been happening over, not today, there have been a series of incidents which have taken place in Haryana, in India's motor town. I mean, is it a coincidence that Gurgaon also kind of epitomizes, the sharp inequalities?
Yeah.
Yes, the concrete and steel structures, the malls, the fashionable, restaurants, and on the other hand, you see the other India, and let's all appreciate, and here I appreciate what Manishankar Iyer says, in this country's mad quest for growth at any cost. And it's interesting that he's quoting Bibek Debroy, who hates Marxists, he hates the left. If he says that inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient has gone up, has shot up in the recent past, then what we are seeing is even those who have been ideologically opposed to the left are today realizing that in the recent past, we've seen a sharp rise in economic inequality,
I don't think
which is creating
anyone denies that. I don't think anyone denies that.
Only 1 minute.
Yeah.
If suppose this particular manager made a caste slur against a particular worker, if this then, suppose what he's saying, if this results in a man being burned to death, if an attempt is made to burn down a factory, if 40 people get injured, and finally at the end of it, the cops move in and it becomes a fortress, it speaks very, very poorly for the way India's, Motors town and this great Maruti company has been running.
I completely understand what both you and Mr. Iyer said, and Mr. Ramkumar wants to respond to what you said, because I think that while no one can disagree about the inequalities you've talked about, it's just so difficult, Mr. Ramkumar, isn't that, to explain that to the family of a man who actually wasn't even involved in the original altercation that took place.
Yeah,
no one can justify it. Does it help you to understand a context, Mr. Ramkumar? Or do you think you can just not justify the way this mob behaved? Do you think it was premeditated, as some reports were suggesting, that the union had come prepared to do this?
I want to make 2 points. Awinash did not use any casteist remark against anybody.
That's right, he did.
Otherwise, we will be indignifying Awinash. Second, Awinash is as much an employee and not an owner. Now, we cannot, under any circumstances, imagine a wage-earning employee, whatever his designation may be, to be beaten to death in the manner he is. And I agree with Manishankar Iyer and Paranjoy that there is inequality in the society and we need to correct it. And I will tell you, Awinash was somebody who lived the life as a middle-class person who wanted to work for the upliftment of the people who he worked for. He is a mild-mannered, quiet, gentle person. And I don't see any reason why anybody, in whatever state of mind they may be, to beat somebody and break his leg to ensure he cannot run away and then burn and leave a person to a cruel death. I can't understand what kind of a human being will do this.
No, I don't think that can be justified under any circumstance.
I just want to take that to Gurudas Dasgupta. Mr. Dasgupta, do you condemn unequivocally the violence that has taken place and the way the trade union behaved in Manesar?
Madam, are you cross-examining me in a court of justice, or you want to know my views?
I want to know your views, Mr. Dasgupta. I know
Please
you're very
answer me
sensitive to everything.
Then don't ask me that. No, I am not sensitive. I am a senior trade unionist and parliamentarian. You must know how to talk. I make my point very clear. We condemn the brutality totally. We find no reason in burning down a man, whatever he might have done. We dissociate with all form of violence. We do not believe it is the trade unionism at all.